Yo, what is going on everyone, and welcome to a brand new tutorial. Today I'm going to show you guys how I master my tracks. This has been a highly requested topic from many of you, so I thought let's just make a video about it. Mastering is a very important part of, finalizing the track and making sure it's release ready. So yeah, without further ado, let's just get right into it. We are going to master my song Riot. This is a song that I've released back in, I think it was June, with Trove on Future Generation. If you haven't checked out the song yet, go check it out. It's on Spotify, iTunes, SoundCloud, basically everywhere. And right now I'm in the master project file. So as you can probably tell, I work with stems. I like to do stem mastering more than one wave file master. And the reason is because I always find myself struggling in the end with a kick being too loud, or a snare being too loud, or elements being too soft or too prominent in the mix. And those things on their own aren't fixable in one wave file, basically. So what I like to do is, after I've done my mixing project, I'm just bouncing out stems again and then mastering them in a new project. So then whenever there's an element being too loud or too soft, I can just simply go here, for example in percussions, and turn up the kick or turn down the kick instead of going back and forth between projects. You're just wasting time at that point, Another very important thing before we actually go in depth about mastering is making sure that you have enough headroom. My track, if I play the track, has about like -3, -4 dB of headroom, which is what you want to have when mastering your track. If you don't have enough headroom, there's barely any space to really make your track louder in the end. So make sure to always have your track around like -4 or -3 dB of headroom at the loudest parts. So in this case, it's going to be the drop. So as you can see, it's not going above -3.3 decibels, which is perfect because that means we have enough freedom and headroom to master. Okay, so the first thing that I want to do is I want to loop the drop, because the drop is obviously the most energetic part of the track. So first thing that I want to do is I want to select an EQ. This is the Pro Q3 from Fat Filter, and I want to separate the stereo frequencies from the mono frequencies in order to make sure that nothing is clashing or nothing is interfering. And then I also would like to boost some of the higher frequencies. All my mixes tend to sound very dull, so just simply adding higher frequencies in an EQ is going to do the job for me. So let me just play the track, and yeah, let's get it going. All right, awesome. So as you could see, I separated the stereo frequencies from the mono frequencies. Basically, how you do that is you make a dot in the EQ, then you select the arrow, and you go to stereo placement, and you select side. And then basically what it's going to do is it's going to separate the stereo frequencies from the mono frequencies. And I wanted to have everything, let's say, below the 120 hertz to be mono, and everything above 120 hertz to be stereo. And this is just basically a rule of thumb that I always apply for all my tracks. It's just making sure to work around that 120 hertz range. And then what I also wanted to do was I wanted to make the synths and the snares wider around the 1700 and the 3K hertz. So I basically boosted those frequency areas in the stereo field. And then as you can also see is I boosted the higher frequencies with about 3.5 dB, 4 dB, and yeah, right now it sounds perfect. Has that nice top end, which is what I want to have. So yeah, this is first EQ, nothing too crazy, honestly. And now what I want to do is I want to compress the track. Just a very subtle compression. So I would go to the SSL compressor from Waves. Let me see, where did it? Yeah, this one. And as I already said, subtle compression. I don't want to squash it because this track, you know, needs to have like that dynamic range in the track. So I'm just gonna play it, and we'll go in depth about it in a second. All right, awesome. So this is the compression setting that I think works best for this track. As you could probably tell, I always like to keep my meter below 4 because I know that if I go above 4, it's going to slightly squash the track in a negative way. It's going to overcompress the track, which is not what I want to have. I want to just slightly compress the track, but not that it's going to be like a sausage, basically, you know? What I did is first I went to the ratio setting, and it depends if I want to go to 2 or 10 because it really depends on how much compression you want to have. In this case, 10 would mean more compression, but for some reason it acts differently, and I like the sound more than what it does at the 2:1 ratio. So I'm just going to keep it at 10. Then what I want to have is a very slow attack and a very fast release. What's going to happen is the transient and the punchiness in the track will be remained. And since the drums and the percussions are very snappy and very punchy, I don't want to compress that as well. You know, I want to compress the overall track, but not also those like snappy drums. So as you could probably tell, very slow attack, 30 milliseconds. I could even put it at 10, but I think 30 is perfect. And then a release of 0.3 seconds. And then having it compressed around like the 6.3 in the threshold section. Nicely stays below the 4 as well, so that's perfect. In order to do this gain staging method, I already start working with the makeup gain. So it's already being boosted with 3 decibels instead of just working with the limiter later. So that's also something that I think is a really good technique and tip, is to work with gain staging already from the beginning of your channel strip chain. So yeah, and definitely keep analog on because that's going to add that like analog flavor to your sound. So that's the compression, and now we can move on to the next plugin, which is going to be another compressor. I like to use the Pro MB from FabFilter, and this is a multiband compressor. And basically, why I love this compressor is because it's going to compress 4 different frequency areas, which is exactly what I want to have. I want to compress the lows, low mids, high mids, and the highs. So there's a very nice preset. It's called the Basic 4-Band Punch and Balance 02, and this is already how it looks like. It's very colorful. And we're just going to mess with this, and I'll catch you guys later. So I've been just tweaking this. Already the setting on its own, it's already pretty good. But as you could notice, the lows from the beginning of the preset were just completely gone because it's compressing the low end so much that there was just no low end at some point. So what I wanted to do was I wanted to reduce the threshold in the low end band. So when I do that, all the low end will still be there basically, but compressed. So you just have overall more control of the frequencies in your track. So and then doing some cool gain staging techniques. So also here, input level set to +1 and then output level +2, because yet again, then the track will be louder and we don't have to rely too much on one limiter later. So then the next plugin that I'm going to use is from Isotope. I think I want to add like a little bit of like crisp, a little bit of saturation to the track. So I want to select the Ozone 8 Exciter, which is a very great plugin for adding like some analog or like some subtle distortion or saturation to your track. And we are going to select Tube instead of Triode, because I know that Tube is a very nice, gives like a very nice sound to the frequency areas. So let's play it. Alright, cool. So also with this technique, slightly boosting the mids, high mids, and the highs with just a little bit of amount. So for example, with the mids, just 1.4, the high mids 1.9, and the highs 2.5. And I've just been, soloing the frequency areas to see, to hear what it does basically, and to see if it actually makes like a subtle difference. So if I bypass this, just adds that more crisp to the overall mix. So now for the next plugin, I'd like to select the Ozone Imager, and this is to make sure that, yet again, after all these plugins, to just make sure that none of the mono frequencies are interfering with the stereo frequencies and that everything is just nicely balanced out. So Ozone 8 Imager, right away I want to set this to 120 hertz yet again. I think this is okay, maybe just a little bit, yeah. Alright, awesome. So this is the imager setting, as you could see. Bandwidth 3 and bandwidth 4 or actually bandwidth 2, 3, and 4 are being boosted with around like the 10 or 20 percentage rate. And yeah, just making sure that all those elements are being wider in the final mix. So yeah, that's basically that. I think that's like pretty much it. I think what I want to do is just add another Pro MB to compress it yet again, because I feel like after all these plugins we're actually losing low end again. So I want to select the mastering basic 4-band punch and balance preset, 021, and then kind of work from here again. right, so basically, also with this one, is just compressing all the frequency areas, but making sure that all the, like for example, the lows are being at the same level now as the highs and the mids and everything. Because as you probably noticed, we lost some of the low end before, and I think it's very important to, gain stage that with compression. So that's what I'm doing here in the second Pro MB, and then also kind of reducing, the high end in the exciter a little bit, and then it's kind of like leveling it out per plugin. That's what I like to do, at least. So now the final plugin on the master chain is going to be the limiter, of course. And for the limiter, I like to select the Fat Filter Pro L, this one. And this is just to make sure that nothing is clipping, that we don't get like internal distortion, and that overall it's just like a loud enough mix. So I think, let me go into the advanced. Yeah, it looks good. Just making sure that the attack is not like too fast, but not too slow, just like with the release. And yeah. So as you could probably tell, I've been kind of moving back and forth yet again between plugins just to make sure that some areas are being well compressed and some areas aren't. It just gives me a lot of freedom to work with, especially with multi-band compressors like the Pro MB. Just, kind of moving the dots a little bit and seeing like what it does. I think right now I have like the perfect balance between the highs and the lows and the mids. So yeah, and then for the limiter, it's just boosting it with around like 6 dB. What I could potentially do, but I usually don't do this like too much, but I could even do another limiter, a different one. So for example, the waves, let me see which one I always use, L1 Ultra Maximizer, and I would even just push in another dB, just threshold to -1, output ceiling -0.1, and then kind of messing with this a little bit. But I don't think in this case it's really necessary because it's already pretty loud enough. Now I can just play the build up and then go into the drop, and then yeah, hopefully we get like a nice, glued result.
Riots inside, burn me to the ground. I can't stop feeling the riot inside. Can't talk to myself, get a hold on me. This is the first time I've tried to breathe, yeah. If there's nothing.
All right, awesome. So I think this actually sounds very, very good, especially for such a quick master for this tutorial. I usually spend like way more time, trying different plugins, trying different techniques, but this is like my go-to, plugin chain and way of mastering. So I hope this was very useful. If you have any questions, please leave a comment below in the comment section and I will get back to you. And yeah, I think that was it for this tutorial. Leave a like, subscribe, and I'll catch you guys in the next tutorial. Peace.